weekend, the video game accessibility community was hit with a hugely impactful loss with the news that Bradon Cole had passed away. For those who follow this series, Bradon's name might well be familiar to you. He has for years been a vocal advocate for improved gaming accessibility, and more specifically, an incredibly talented accessibility consultant whose name is attached to many of the biggest improvements made to blind accessibility this past decade. When we look at the modern wave of increased awareness for video game accessibility industry-wide, The Last of Us Part 2 is many people's default reference point. One of the most impressive advancements for gaming accessibility made with the game was its incredibly robust blind accessibility settings suite, which Bradon worked on as a consultant. The third-person stealth action shooter was playable start to finish by sightless blind players via audio cues, traversal assists, and navigation assist features. Bradon's work on the Part 1 remaster helped to push forward cinematic audio descriptions, a feature that's slowly but steadily becoming more common in video games now as a result. Those games went a long way towards showing that 3D AAA big-budget games could aim for sightless blind player accessibility as an end goal, and the ripples that left are only now starting to be felt more widely across the big-budget industry. Bradon's name comes up time and time again when you're looking at AAA games innovating in blind accessibility within their genres. Last year's Forza Motorsport, for example, made the generally very inaccessible technical racing sim genre accessible via audio cues and other blind driving assists, in huge part by consulting with Bradon for years behind the scenes during development. It's hard to know what to say when someone you know passes away. Bradon undoubtedly left a legacy, and it would be easy to talk about that simply in terms of the things that he worked on that are out there, that are in the world currently and have received critical acclaim. Instead, I think I want to talk about the human impact that Bradon had on others, and will continue to have for years to come. A few weeks ago, I was putting together a video for this channel, and as part of it, I asked disabled gamers to reach out and share their stories of what gaming accessibility means to them. One of those stories was shared by a man named Chad Michael Boughton, who talked in depth about how, as his usable vision deteriorated due to his retinitis pigmentosa, he had to mourn the loss of gaming as a hobby. He gave up on the idea he would ever be able to play video games again, until being pointed toward The Last of Us Part 2. Chad thanked Bradon Cole specifically for his work on that game and the impact that that work had on his life.
My name is Chad Michael Boughton. My pronouns are he, him. I am a blind podcast host, accessibility consultant, professional speaker, and this is why accessibility in gaming is important to me. I will always remember how back in 2019, when Kingdom Hearts 3 had just released, how excited I was to play the game. I had been a longtime fan of the series and was finally ready to experience the end of the trilogy. However, at this point in time, I was unaware of how bad my retinitis pigmentosa had gotten and just how much of my usable vision I really had lost. I can remember not only not being able to get through the first world, but just not knowing where I needed to go or what I needed to do to progress throughout the game. I will never forget how upset I was and how I ended up calling my mother and father, crying to them on the phone, and just telling them, hey, I think I have to give up on gaming. I think that because of my blindness, I can no longer keep gaming. And it was a pretty big thing for me because growing up, video games had been the best way for me to cope with losing my vision and just not being able to control what was going on in my life. I had all intentions to never play a video game again, and for the next 2 years, I kept true to that promise. I thought that I would go the rest of my life without playing another video game. But, in 2021, my brother-in-law, he sent me a text telling me about a game called The Last of Us Part 2, and how I should check it out, which I thought was crazy because I remember being able to play the game, the first game that is, back when I had usable vision. And I was just thinking to myself, there's no way I'm going to be able to play the sequel due to my limited amount of vision. And boy, was I wrong. I could have not been any more wrong. And it was a welcome surprise for myself to boot up the game and realize that my vision wasn't the problem. It was that up until this point, games really just weren't being made to accommodate gamers like myself and so many others. If it wasn't for the work that Brandon Cole and Naughty Dog did on The Last of Us Part 2, I don't think I would ever have gotten back into gaming, and I can only imagine where my life would be right now if I didn't get back into gaming. I owe accessibility in gaming so much. It gave me a career. Getting back into gaming, it made me realize that I have a lived experience worth sharing, and by sharing that lived experience with Nintendo Life in an article I got to publish back in 2022, I was able to get in contact with the Royal National Institute for Blind People out of the United Kingdom, and they allowed me to come on and share my story. And thanks to the encouragement of the employees there over at RNIB Connect Radio, I found the courage to start my own podcast. And due to that, I started meeting people like Tara Velker and Ian Hamilton, and thanks to their generosity, they started giving me a lot of my first couple of work when it comes to accessibility consulting. And honestly, I could never work a normal job if I wanted to go back and actually try and work a 9 to 5. I couldn't do it with the multitude of disabilities that I have. And thank goodness for remote work, and thank goodness for accessibility in gaming, because without it, I wouldn't have a career. And not only that, I wouldn't have the optimism, I wouldn't have the positive mental health, and I wouldn't have my positive disability identity. I really owe so much in my life right now to accessibility in gaming. It's really given me a place in life. Obviously, there's a big thing about, disability being ability and making our disadvantage into our advantage. And I know a lot of people don't like the whole positive self-talk kind of thing, or, my disability is my superpower. And I understand that, and I completely would never try and go against any of that. But for me, I'm just happy that I can find a good place in my life when it comes to my disability, and realize that even though it sucks being disabled, it sucks being blind, and of course, I'd rather not have to go through life losing my vision, at least there is something that I can do to give back and hopefully change the landscape for the next generation. I've struggled and suffered enough myself that hopefully whatever work I can do right now with these amazing developers and my fellow colleagues, hopefully it'll make it a better world for those that are coming after me. Because honestly, at the end of the day, that's all I really want, is I want a world where people don't ever have to think I have to give up on something that impacts me in a positive way.
I know from speaking with the pair that Brandon got to see that video and got to hear Chad's words. He got to hear the impact that his work had had. Chad's story is far from rare, and I'm thankful that Brandon got to hear from so many people about the real-world impact of his work. One of the last conversations that I had with him was about how much of an emotional pick-me-up it was to know that he'd made a positive impact on someone's life with his work. For as much or as little as it means, Brandon knew the impact of his work. He got to hear from those whose lives he changed, and his work will undoubtedly live on beyond him. He helped to get something moving that has momentum and isn't going to easily stop. He proved that with the right consultants and some creativity and budget and effort, there are ways to make even the most seemingly inaccessible game genres accessible to people with disabilities that might have been considered impossibly hard to account for just a few years ago. A big part of why I wanted to include the full version of Chad's video here today in its unedited form is to show that when you work hard like Brandon did to make games more accessible, that legacy inevitably spreads. Brandon's work on The Last of Us Part 2 created a series of events that led Chad from thinking he'd never be able to play video games again to actively working his first jobs as a blind accessibility consultant. Brandon's work didn't just let Chad get back into gaming, it led to someone new joining that fight for improved blind accessibility in gaming. That's Brandon's legacy living on in a tangible way. His fight is being fought by those he helped. Chad's story is not an outlier. Brandon's work has actively led to more people today fighting for improvements in blind accessibility in games. Brandon was at the absolute heart of the fight for gaming accessibility. He was a charming, insightful, wonderful person. His passing is a huge loss, and there's nobody else quite like him in this industry. While we can't alter his passing, I do want to see a few things happen in his memory. I hope we see the accessibility community continue to fight for the kinds of accessibility features that Brandon championed. and I want to see others in this space praised for their work today, while they're here to know how impactful they've been. I know that his fiancée, Misty Rayburn, is attempting to complete any projects that Bradon was working on prior to his passing and continue his legacy. I wish her all the love and support in the world, and hope others make the effort to support her in continuing Brandon's work going forward. If there's someone in the game accessibility space whose work has had a meaningful impact on you, please drop them a message today and let them know. They might not always be around to hear it, and they deserve to know, as Bradon did, the human impact of their work.